he thought it was just a casual date. But meeting a girl who couldn't speak or walk would change his heart and his life forever. John had never thought that a simple trip to his favorite coffee shop could change his life so unexpectedly. It was a chilly afternoon, the kind where the wind teased at the edges of your jacket, and he had stopped in to grab a cup of coffee before heading back to his apartment. The place was busy but cozy, with the rich aroma of coffee beans mixing with the faint smell of pastries. People were scattered around, some working on laptops, others chatting quietly with friends. John liked this place because it felt familiar, like a small world where he could pause and breathe as he stood in line waiting for his order. He noticed a girl sitting alone at a corner table. She was smiling softly to herself, looking down at a small notebook in front of her. There was something about her presence that caught his attention, not just her smile, but a kind of calm aura, like she was comfortable in her own world, separate from the chaos around her. He watched her for a moment, trying to understand why she intrigued him so much. She seemed completely focused on her writing, but the gentle curve of her lips whenever she looked up suggested she was seeing something joyful in her thoughts. John felt a sudden, almost impulsive urge to talk to her. Normally, he wouldn't approach someone he didn't know, but there was something about her that made him feel he should. Perhaps it was the warmth in her smile, or the way she seemed to radiate quiet confidence. With a slight shake of his head, as if to reassure himself, he walked toward her table. "Hi," he said, trying to sound casual. She looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled and nodded. Her eyes were expressive, filled with curiosity and kindness. And something inside John relaxed instantly. He introduced himself, and she did the same, though she didn't speak aloud. He quickly realized that she didn't respond in words, which confused him for a moment. He assumed she might be shy, or perhaps just preferred to write things down, so he waited for her to write a reply. She pulled a small notepad from her bag and began to write something, carefully forming each letter. John watched, fascinated by the care and attention she put into her writing. He leaned slightly closer, reading her words. "Hello, I'm Emily." Something about that moment made John smile. It was strange meeting someone who didn't communicate the way most people did, yet he felt an immediate connection. He found himself wanting to know more about her, curious about her world, the way she thought, and what made her smile. On a whim, he asked if she would like to join him for a coffee sometime. She paused, looking up at him with her expressive eyes, then nodded. Her nod was small but confident, and it told John everything he needed to know. She wanted to meet him again. Over the next few days, John couldn't stop thinking about Emily. He wondered how he would communicate with someone who didn't speak, how he could get to know her without words. Part of him felt nervous, but another part was excited by the challenge. He began researching ways to communicate with deaf people, watching videos online, trying to understand basic sign language. He realized this wasn't just a casual interest. He genuinely wanted to connect with her, to make her feel comfortable and understood. When they finally met again, John brought a small notebook, thinking it might make communication easier. Emily smiled at him as he approached, her eyes lighting up with recognition. The first few minutes were awkward. They both struggled to express themselves. John stumbled over words, unsure how to ask questions or respond to her answers. But Emily didn't seem bothered. She wrote slowly, carefully, and when John read her words, he felt a mix of relief and admiration. She had patience, something he hadn't realized he would need so much, as they talked through notes and gestures. John learned small things about Emily, her favorite books, her love for art, her gentle sense of humor. Every little detail fascinated him. He noticed how she observed the world, the subtle ways she reacted to light, colors, and sounds that most people would take for granted. Even though she couldn't speak or move freely due to her paralysis, John found her presence vibrant and full of life. He began to appreciate that communication wasn't just about words, it was about understanding, empathy, and paying attention to small details. By the end of the afternoon, John realized that this encounter was far more meaningful than he had anticipated. What started as a casual invitation to coffee had turned into the beginning of something unique. He felt a sense of excitement mixed with nervousness. He didn't know what the future held, but he wanted to explore it with her. Emily, with her quiet strength and expressive eyes, had already made a mark on him, and he couldn't ignore it. Leaving the coffee shop that day, John walked slowly, replaying their conversation in his mind. He felt a strange mix of emotions, curiosity, hope, and even a little fear, but most of all, a desire to see Emily again. He realized that meeting her wasn't a coincidence. It was a chance to connect with someone truly remarkable. Someone who would challenge his perceptions and open his heart in ways he hadn't imagined. By the time he reached his apartment, he was smiling to himself, thinking about how a simple mistake inviting someone out without realizing who she really was could lead to something that felt so extraordinary. He didn't yet know the full story of Emily's life or the challenges she faced, but he felt ready to find out. And for the first time in a long while, John felt that life had a beautiful surprise waiting just for him. John was nervous the night before his second meeting with Emily. He knew he wanted to get to know her better. But he also worried about the challenges ahead. Communicating with someone who couldn't hear or move easily was unfamiliar territory for him, and he wanted to do it right. He spent hours watching videos online, learning simple signs, and practicing gestures in front of the mirror. Even though it felt awkward at first, he was determined. He didn't want Emily to feel frustrated or that he wasn't trying. More than that, he felt a strange excitement at the idea of connecting with her in a way he had never experienced with anyone else. When he arrived at the coffee shop the next afternoon, Emily was already waiting at their usual table. Her smile greeted him immediately, warm and reassuring. John felt his nervousness melt slightly. He noticed the careful way she had arranged her notebook and pen, as if anticipating their conversation. She waved at him using both her hands, a small motion, but full of meaning. John waved back, trying to match her energy. Sitting down, he felt the first real moment of quiet intimacy between them. No words, just presence. At first, their communication was slow and deliberate. Emily wrote each word carefully in her notebook, and John read, responding either with gestures or by writing back. Sometimes he misinterpreted her signs or expressions, and sometimes she misunderstood his gestures. They laughed at these mistakes, sharing moments of lightheartedness that broke the tension. John quickly realized that the laughter and patience were just as important as the words themselves. It wasn't about perfect communication. It was about trying and caring enough to understand each other. Over time, John began to notice Emily's unique way of expressing herself. Even though she couldn't speak, she had a remarkable ability to convey emotion through her eyes. Her small facial expressions, and the way she positioned her hands. He found himself fascinated by every detail. A slight raise of her eyebrow could tell him she was curious or amused. A small tilt of her head could mean agreement or hesitation. Every tiny movement had meaning, and John learned to pay attention in a way he never had before. For him, it was like discovering a new language entirely made of emotion and attention. As they continued meeting, John began to understand the daily challenges Emily faced. She was paralyzed from the waist down and relied on others for mobility in certain daily tasks. Simple activities, which most people took for granted, required careful planning and effort for her. Despite these challenges, Emily carried herself with dignity and calmness. She never complained. She never sought pity. John admired her strength and resilience deeply. He began to see that her limitations didn't define her. Her spirit did. Emily also had a remarkable sense of humor, something John discovered when she used her notebook to play small pranks or write clever jokes. He laughed more than he had in months, realizing that her inability to speak didn't make her any less vibrant or fun. In fact, it seemed to amplify her creativity. She had to find new ways to express joy, mischief, and emotion, and John found himself fascinated by her cleverness. He started to anticipate her gestures, noticing little patterns and subtle cues that made their interactions smoother. John also realized that learning to communicate with Emily was changing him. He became more patient, more observant, and more attentive. He couldn't just rush through a conversation or assume he understood her feelings. He had to slow down, think, and focus on the moment. In a way, it was freeing. Life outside had always felt rushed, with constant noise and distractions. Here with Emily, he had to be present, and that presence deepened his appreciation for the world around him. He began noticing little things he had never paid attention to: the way light reflected on a cup of coffee, the sound of wind outside, the warmth of sunlight on his hand. All of it felt more vivid when he was focused on her. There were moments of frustration, too. Sometimes John felt inadequate or clumsy, misreading a gesture or failing to understand a subtle hint. He worried that Emily might think he didn't care or wasn't capable of being patient. But Emily had an incredible ability to put him at ease. A small smile, a reassuring nod, or a gentle touch of her hand told him that it was okay, that she appreciated his effort and that she valued his presence above perfection. John began to see that relationships weren't about flawless communication, they were about commitment, empathy, and care. As days turned into weeks, John and Emily developed a rhythm. They could talk without words, understanding each other in ways that went beyond simple communication. They discovered shared interests: books, movies, and art. Emily would show John sketches she had drawn, and he would share his favorite music, describing it with gestures and written words. Every encounter felt like a small adventure, as if they were exploring a new world together, one where limitations didn't exist, only possibilities. John also noticed how Emily viewed the world differently. She had a unique perspective, noticing things he had never considered. She loved the small details: the way sunlight hit a window, the gentle sway of a tree branch, the sound of rain tapping against the roof. These were things that most people overlooked, but to Emily, they were beautiful. And through her eyes, John began to see them too. He felt grateful for this new way of experiencing life, and he realized that Emily was teaching him lessons that went far beyond words. By the end of one long afternoon, John felt a deep sense of connection with Emily. What had started as a simple curiosity had blossomed into something far richer. He felt a sense of admiration, respect, and even love for her, not despite her differences, but because of the way she faced the world, full of courage, patience, and joy. He knew that this relationship would require effort, but he felt ready. He realized that connecting with someone so different from himself had taught him more about life, empathy, and humanity than he could have imagined. As they parted that day, Emily gave John a small gesture, a wave, a smile, and a careful note saying, "Thank you for being here." John held the note in his hand, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. He knew that their journey together was only beginning, but he also knew that it was going to be meaningful, transformative, and unforgettable. Meeting Emily had opened a door to a world he hadn't known existed, and he couldn't wait to explore it with her. As John and Emily continued to spend time together, their bond grew stronger, but it was not without challenges. At first, the relationship felt exciting and full of discovery. Every day brought new ways to communicate, small adventures, and moments of laughter. However, as the novelty wore off, John began to feel a creeping sense of doubt and frustration. He had thought that love was simple, something that just happened naturally. Now he realized that being with someone like Emily required patience, effort, and constant attention. And sometimes he worried he wasn't doing enough. John's doubts often started quietly in the middle of ordinary days. He would think about his friends and how they dated people who seemed normal by society's standards. Their relationships seemed effortless in comparison. He would question himself. Was he making a mistake? Was he prepared for the reality of dating someone with Emily's challenges? There were times when he felt exhausted from trying to learn new ways to communicate, from reading her expressions carefully, and from making sure she felt comfortable and understood. He didn't want to give up, but he also didn't want to fail her. Emily sensed his inner struggle, though she could not speak. She had learned to read him well through his gestures, facial expressions, and the energy he carried. When he appeared distant or tense, she would respond gently, offering reassurance in the smallest ways: a smile, a soft touch, or a note saying, "It's okay." Her patience was endless, and John often felt guilty for feeling frustrated despite her efforts. He realized that while she had limitations that were obvious to the world, her emotional strength far exceeded his own at times. She had faced far greater challenges and still maintained a calm and kind presence. Misunderstandings, became a common part of their days. A misread gesture could lead to confusion. A joke that John thought was funny could seem awkward if Emily didn't understand it the way he intended. He sometimes overthought every word or motion, worried that he had made a mistake. On one particular afternoon, a small misunderstanding about plans spiraled into tension. John had assumed she understood that he wanted to meet at a new art exhibit. But Emily had interpreted his gestures differently. For a moment, frustration bubbled up, and John felt helpless. Yet as he looked at her patiently waiting with her notebook and pen, he realized that losing his temper or walking away would solve nothing. He had to slow down, breathe, and start over. These moments, while challenging, became lessons in humility for John. He learned that love was not about perfection. It wasn't about flawless communication or always knowing the right thing to do. It was about effort, patience, and the willingness to keep trying, even when mistakes were made. He began to see that every small gesture mattered: a kind smile, an attentive look, a patient wait. These were the moments that built trust, more than any grand declaration of love ever could. John also had to confront his own fears about society's judgment. Friends and family occasionally questioned his choice, albeit gently, asking if dating someone like Emily was too hard or not realistic. Some comments stung, even though they were not meant to hurt. He felt defensive, knowing that their doubts came from ignorance rather than malice, but it still made him question himself. Emily, sensing his inner turmoil, never chastised him. Instead, she showed through quiet actions that she understood him and appreciated his presence. Her trust in him gave him the courage to keep going, even when he doubted himself. Despite the challenges, there were moments of extraordinary connection. John began to see Emily's humor, intelligence, and creativity in ways that most people would never notice at first glance. When she made a joke, even through written words or gestures, he laughed freely, feeling closer to her. When she shared her artwork or her thoughts on a book, he listened with genuine interest, seeing the world through her eyes. Every day revealed new layers of her personality, and he found himself constantly learning and growing. John also became more aware of his own emotions during this time. He realized how easy it was to take things for granted before meeting Emily: the ability to speak freely, move without assistance, or assume that communication would always be simple. With her, he had to slow down, be deliberate, and pay attention. This slowed pace taught him empathy, patience, and a deeper understanding of human connection. He discovered that love required adaptation and openness, and that personal growth was inseparable from maintaining a meaningful relationship. One evening, as they sat together in Emily's apartment, John watched her struggle slightly with her notebook. She had been writing for a long time, trying to explain something about her day. He noticed the effort it took for her to form each letter clearly and carefully, and he felt a rush of emotion. Here was someone who faced daily challenges that he couldn't even imagine, and yet she made the effort to connect with him. He realized then that his own frustrations were small in comparison. Emily's courage humbled him, and he felt a deep appreciation for her patience, kindness, and determination. There were also moments when John felt isolated in his doubts. He sometimes wished for someone to tell him he was doing the right thing, or to reassure him that the effort he was putting in mattered. Yet those moments always passed when he looked at Emily. Her presence reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. She was not a burden, nor a test. She was a remarkable person with feelings, thoughts, and a life that he wanted to be part of. Her trust in him was more than enough guidance to continue. Gradually, John began to embrace the reality of the relationship fully. He accepted that there would be miscommunications, small frustrations, and moments of doubt. But he also realized that the reward was greater than any challenge. He started to anticipate Emily's gestures, to understand her subtle cues, and to communicate more intuitively. Each success, each shared smile, strengthened their bond. What once felt like a mistake began to feel like a deliberate choice, one that he was proud to make. By the end of this period, John had grown in ways he hadn't expected. He had learned patience, humility, empathy, and the beauty of truly seeing another person beyond their limitations. He realized that relationships were not just about compatibility in the traditional sense, they were about effort, understanding, and a willingness to meet someone halfway. Emily had taught him that love was about presence, trust, and shared growth, not perfection or convenience. Through all the misunderstandings and moments of self-doubt, John came to a profound realization. The challenges of loving Emily were not obstacles, they were opportunities. Opportunities to grow, to learn, and to connect on a deeper level than he had ever known. The frustrations he once feared had become lessons, and the doubts he once felt had turned into understanding. He now saw Emily not just as someone with challenges, but as a person of extraordinary depth, courage, and heart, and in that acceptance, he found a peace he had never known before, a certainty that, despite the difficulties, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Being with Emily was not a mistake. It was the beginning of a journey, one that would test him, teach him, and ultimately transform him in ways he could never have imagined. John had never experienced anything like that evening. The air was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the city outside Emily's apartment window. They had spent the afternoon together as usual, sharing notes, laughing at small jokes, and observing the world around them. But there was something different in the way Emily was looking at him this time. Her eyes were calm but intense, and she had her notebook open, resting on her lap. John sensed that something important was about to happen, though he didn't yet understand what it was. For weeks, John had been growing closer to Emily. He had learned to understand her gestures, her subtle expressions, and the rhythm of her communication. But despite this connection, he sometimes felt there were walls he could not reach, parts of her world that remained a mystery. Emily had been patient, as always, never forcing anything but quietly offering herself in ways he could perceive. That evening, John realized that she was about to give him a glimpse into her inner world, something she had not shared before. Emily began writing carefully, each word deliberate and clear. John leaned closer, reading every line with growing anticipation. The first few sentences were simple, but they quickly became deeply personal. She wrote about her life before her paralysis, about the moments she had felt invisible or misunderstood by the world. She described the challenges she faced daily, not just physically, but emotionally. She spoke of the loneliness that often came with her condition, the isolation from a world that moved in ways she could not follow. John's chest tightened as he read. He realized that he had never fully comprehended the depth of her struggles, the quiet courage it took for her to live each day, the way she expressed herself through carefully chosen words, deliberate gestures, and heartfelt notes was moving in a way he could not have imagined. Each line carried vulnerability, honesty, and strength all at once. John felt a lump in his throat, unsure how to respond but unable to look away. Then Emily's words shifted to him directly. She wrote about what she felt for him, about the impact he had on her life. She spoke of the joy she found in his patience, the laughter he brought into her days, and the warmth of his presence. She wrote that meeting him had changed her life, giving her hope and a sense of connection she had rarely felt. Every word was a reminder that love could exist beyond barriers, beyond physical limitations and societal expectations. John's eyes filled with tears as he read. He tried to speak, but words failed him. He wanted to tell her how much her words meant, how they had reached him in ways he never expected. He wanted to express gratitude for her trust, her honesty, and the courage it took to share so openly. But all he could do was reach out and gently take her hand. Emily smiled softly, her eyes reflecting understanding, as if she knew the storm of emotion he was experiencing. The intimacy of that moment, the honesty, the vulnerability, the unspoken connection was overwhelming in its beauty. For the first time, John fully understood the depth of Emily's life beyond what he could see. She had faced hardships that he could barely imagine, yet she had approached life with resilience, humor, and grace. Her words were not just about her struggles, they were about her perspective, her inner strength, and her capacity to love. John realized that his own life had been measured in smaller challenges, and that Emily's courage had quietly taught him lessons he could never have learned otherwise. As the tears streamed down his face, John felt a mix of emotions, awe admiration, gratitude, and deep love. He thought about all the moments they had shared, the awkward gestures, the laughter, the learning, small victories of communication, and understood that every one of those moments had led to this one. Emily's words were a gift, a revelation that transcended anything he had experienced before. He felt honored to be trusted with her truth, humbled by her bravery, and moved by her sincerity. The room was silent, except for the sound of his quiet breathing and the scratch of Emily's pen as she continued to write. She explained that she had always hoped someone would see her beyond her limitations, someone who would value her for who she truly was. She told him that he had done exactly that, not by pity, not by heroics, but by being present, patient, and genuine. Every note she wrote carried love, not in grand gestures, but in authenticity, and John could feel it profoundly. John held her hand tighter, trying to communicate everything he felt without words. He wanted her to know that her story had touched him deeply, that her strength inspired him, and that he would always be there for her. He felt a profound connection, unlike anything he had ever known, as if their hearts were speaking a language that words could never capture. Emily's vulnerability had opened a door. He stepped through it with complete trust and openness. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. Up until then, John had been learning, adapting, and understanding Emily's world. Now he was fully aware of the impact they had on each other's lives. He realized that love was not just about attraction or companionship. It was about seeing someone fully, embracing their entire being, and choosing to be present despite challenges. Emily's words brought him to tears, but they also filled him with a sense of purpose and clarity about what it meant to truly care for someone. John spent hours reading and rereading Emily's notes, trying to absorb every nuance, every emotion, every story. He reflected on how far they had come from awkward first meetings to this profound exchange of hearts and minds. He understood that the connection they shared was rare, something that transcended ordinary relationships. It was built on patience, understanding, and deep emotional resonance. He realized that he didn't just care for Emily, he had come to admire her spirit, her courage, and her capacity for love. As the night wore on, John felt a quiet peace. He understood that the challenges they had faced were part of the journey, and that the moments of doubt and frustration had only made this connection stronger. Emily had given him a gift he would never forget, the opportunity to see life through her eyes, to understand the strength it took to live fully despite limitations, and to experience love in its most sincere form. He knew that from this night onward, his feelings for her would be deeper, more compassionate, and more committed than ever before. By the end of the evening, John had learned something invaluable. Love could not be measured by convenience or ease. It was measured by effort, patience, understanding, and the willingness to embrace someone fully, including their challenges and vulnerabilities. Emily had shown him that true connection came from authenticity and courage, and he felt honored to be part of her life. Her words had moved him to tears, but they had also strengthened him, giving him a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly care for another human being. For John, that night was unforgettable. It was the moment he realized that what had begun as curiosity and tentative friendship had become something profound and transformative. Emily had shared herself entirely, and he had responded with all of his heart. He knew that from this point forward, their relationship would continue to grow, deepen, and challenge both of them in ways that were meaningful and beautiful. The tears he shed were not just of emotion, they were of gratitude, love, and the recognition of something rare and extraordinary. After that night, John felt a quiet certainty he had never experienced before. Emily's words had opened his heart in ways he couldn't have imagined, and he knew that he wanted to continue this journey with her, fully and without hesitation. The relationship that had begun almost by accident now felt deliberate, meaningful, and transformative. John understood that love, in its truest form, it wasn't about ease or convenience. It was about choosing someone every day, embracing their challenges and celebrating their strengths. In the days and weeks that followed, John committed himself fully to understanding Emily's world. He learned more sign language and began to anticipate her gestures and expressions almost instinctively. Communication, which had once been slow and deliberate, now flowed naturally. They could share thoughts, jokes, and ideas in a way that felt effortless, even though it was built on patience, practice, and mutual respect. John found joy in these interactions, discovering that the effort required to connect with Emily was also what made their relationship unique and beautiful. Emily continued to inspire John with her resilience. He watched as she navigated daily life with courage, never complaining, never asking for sympathy. Her approach to life was calm, deliberate, and full of grace. It reminded him to appreciate the small things he had previously overlooked. Even routine activities, pouring a cup of tea, turning a page in a book, or adjusting her wheelchair were imbued with care and intention. John admired her for this quiet strength, and it motivated him to be more thoughtful, patient, and present in his own life. Their relationship deepened in ways that went beyond simple companionship. John began to notice how Emily had shaped his understanding of human connection. He realized that love was not just about shared interests or physical attraction. It was about empathy, understanding, and the willingness to meet someone where they were. Emily had taught him to slow down, to pay attention to subtle cues, and to appreciate the depth of unspoken communication. He saw how meaningful a gaze, a smile, or a gentle touch could be, and he cherished these moments. As deeply as any spoken words, John also became more confident in facing the world with Emily, where he had once worried about society's judgments or the opinions of friends and family. He now felt certain of his choices. He no longer feared that dating someone with challenges would be difficult or strange. Instead, he saw it as a unique opportunity to grow alongside Emily, to experience love in a form that many people might never understand. The bond they shared was rare, and he felt grateful every day for the chance to be part of her life. Together, they explored new experiences. John found ways to include Emily in activities she loved, from visiting art galleries to attending small community events. They discovered shared passions and created routines that brought joy to both of them. Each new experience became a testament to their teamwork, patience, and commitment. Even when things didn't go perfectly, a planned outing delayed by her mobility challenges, or a miscommunication in gestures, John and Emily learned to laugh and adapt. Finding solutions together and celebrating small victories, John also reflected on his own personal growth. He realized that loving Emily had changed him profoundly. He had become more patient, empathetic, and aware of the world around him, where he once rushed through life. He noticed details he had never paid attention to: the way sunlight streamed through a window, delicate sounds of nature, the subtle expressions on people's faces. Loving Emily had taught him that life was richer when observed with care and intention, and that connection with another human being could transform one's understanding of the world. Emily, for her part, was equally enriched by their relationship. She had discovered a partner who genuinely valued her, who made the effort to understand her world, and who celebrated her for who she truly was. John's patience, kindness, and willingness to adapt had shown her that love could be authentic, steadfast, and freeing. Together, they created a safe space where both of them could express themselves fully. Without fear of judgment or misunderstanding, their bond became a sanctuary, a place of trust, respect, and shared growth. One evening, as they sat together in Emily's apartment, John reflected on how far they had come. He remembered their first awkward interactions, the slow learning of gestures, and the moments of self-doubt that had tested him. He realized that each challenge had brought them closer together, had deepened their understanding of one another, and had strengthened their commitment. What had started as a mistake now felt like destiny, a chance encounter that had led to a profound and transformative relationship. John and Emily began to talk, in their own way, about the future. They discussed hopes, dreams, and aspirations, always through gestures, notes, and expressions that had become second nature to them. They knew there would be challenges ahead: health issues, mobility limitations, and societal perceptions, but they were ready to face them together. Each conversation reinforced their trust and commitment, And they learned that planning a life together wasn't about ignoring difficulties, but about embracing them with courage and teamwork. Their love also became a quiet inspiration to those around them. Friends and family, who had initially doubted the relationship, began to see the beauty of their bond. They witnessed the care, patience, and genuine affection John and Emily shared, and they were moved by the depth of connection that had grown between them. John and Emily's relationship showed that love could transcend physical limitations, societal expectations, and everyday obstacles, and that true intimacy was built on understanding, respect, and shared effort. Over time, John learned to appreciate Emily in ways he had never thought possible. He saw her not as someone with challenges, but as a person of extraordinary courage, intelligence, humor, and heart. Every moment with her, whether simple or extraordinary, felt meaningful. Even ordinary days were filled with joy, connection, and learning. John realized that being with Emily was not just a choice he had made. It was a gift, one that had transformed his life and outlook in ways he could never have imagined. The small routines they shared became the foundation of a life together. Morning coffee, quiet afternoons, shared meals, and evening walks were not just habits. They were expressions of care and devotion. Each gesture, no matter how ordinary, carried significance. They learned to celebrate not just big milestones, but also the small victories, a note that captured a perfect thought, a successful communication, or a shared laugh. These moments strengthened their bond and reminded them of the power of presence, patience, and understanding. John also discovered that loving Emily required continual growth. He had to remain attentive, empathetic, and patient, but he found joy in the effort. He saw that love was not static, it was a dynamic process. A daily choice to be present, to communicate, and to support one another. Emily, with her quiet strength, mirrored this commitment. Together, they became a team, learning, adapting, and growing alongside one another. By the time several months had passed, John and Emily had transformed not only their relationship, but also their outlook on life. John had grown into a more compassionate, patient, and understanding person, while Emily had found a partner who truly saw her, valued her, and loved her deeply. Together, they had created a world of their own making, a world built on trust, respect, and a profound connection that transcended words and physical limitations. Looking back, John realized that what had begun as a chance meeting, the kind of encounter most people might forget, had become a life-defining experience. Emily had not only touched his heart, but had reshaped his understanding of love, courage, and human connection. He understood that the true beauty of their relationship lay in their ability to embrace each other fully, to celebrate strengths, and to face challenges with patience and empathy. And so, John and Emily continued their journey together, knowing that love was not about perfection or ease, but about presence, understanding, and shared growth. Every day brought new lessons, new moments of joy, and new opportunities to connect. They had learned to navigate life as a team, and in doing so, they had discovered a love that was rare, enduring, and transformative. John knew with certainty and gratitude that meeting Emily by mistake had been the most extraordinary and life-changing event he could have ever experienced.